Hi, it's Chelsea of Friday Pattern Company. Welcome back to the Hughes Dress Sew Along. So this is part 2. If you haven't watched part 1, then you can go back and watch that one. In this video, we're going to be going over assembling the skirt, attaching it to the bodice, and then finishing touches, hems, buttonholes, buttons, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm excited to show you the finished dress, and yeah, happy sewing. Alrighty, we'll start with the pockets. So press that top edge under 3/8 of an inch, and then press it under 3/8 of an inch again, and then we're going to edge stitch 1/8 of an inch from our little folded edge that we make. So not from the top, I guess that's 1/4 inch from the top. And then we are also going to press the bottom edge of the pocket under 3/8 of an inch. And if you get mixed up with the sides and the tops and bottoms of the pocket, just remember that the sides have notches and the top and bottom do not. And repeat this on both pockets. And here's our pocket in all its glory. We've got that bottom edge under 3/8 of an inch and then the little edge stitching on the top. So the pocket first gets attached to the skirt side front F piece. So there's a single notch on one side and a double notch on the other, and there's a single notch as well on your pocket and a double notch on the other, so we'll just match those up. You're going to base stitch down the sides of the pocket at 1/4 inch from the edge, and then you'll edge stitch across the bottom of the pocket to secure the pocket in place. And then when this skirt side front gets sewn into the skirt, the pocket will just be nestled in there nicely. It's gonna look great. Take this to the machine and sew the 3 sides. Make sure not to sew the top part shut. You'll repeat these steps on both sides. Now we grab our skirt center front piece ease, and you've got a lining piece for this and a main fabric. You should have two mains, 2 linings. Put the lining and main pieces right sides together, and we're gonna sew down the long center front seam. So it's this straight one that's not slanted. It doesn't have any notches on it. And you'll just sew this with your regular 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way down. Here we have that seam finished. So now we're going to understitch, and that means we'll open it up and we're going to push the seam allowance towards the lining, and then we will stitch 1/8 inch from that seam on the seam allowance so that it holds the seam allowance to the lining. Now that's done, and that'll keep our lining from rolling forward, and you'll press that just so that it has a nice edge. Now that that's sorted, we'll attach the center front to the side front. And the skirt pieces start to look similar, so I have them labeled with tape, and also you just want to make sure you're matching notches. This also has the pocket sewn to it, so there's a few clues there. But you'll match up the notches, and just if you're seeing, trying to match up a single notch with a double notch, you've got your pieces switched around. So we're going to match up this seam, and then we'll sew again. We'll do that 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way down. That's done, and we are going to repeat that for both sides of your skirt front and side fronts. This seam needs to be pressed open, and it also needs to be finished. So here I am using my ruler to finger press this flat. Why did I choose corduroy? Anyway, once you have your seam pressed open, you can finish it in the way that you've been finishing your other seams. I'm just going to stick with that zigzag stitch, but again, dealer's choice here. So here's your skirt center back H piece, and we're going to attach it to our skirt side back G pieces. And again, they start to look really similar, so just make sure you're matching up those notches. You're going to see a triple notch on one side and a double notch on the other. Triple notch matches up with the center back, and then that double notch on your skirt side back is going to match up on the side seam. It's all coming together. So just like we've been doing, 3/8 of an inch down this one, and then we're gonna Press it open, finish the seam, repeat on both sides. So I have all of that done, and I'm going to attach the fronts to the backs at the side seams. So again, you're laying this out, you're matching up notches, and then using the 3/8 inch seam allowance, pressing it open. Here's our skirt in all of its glory, and it's ready to be attached to the bodice. And this is the fun part because this is where it becomes a dress. So the seams are all going to be matched up on the skirt and the bodice. And for this first go, we're just attaching the main fabric and not sewing through the lining. So match up each of these seams and they should be pressed open. Mine aren't pressed as open because I can't iron them. So yours will hopefully be pressed more open, but otherwise you can pin it to make sure it lays flat. And then, yeah, this will just be 3/8 inch seam across this waist. Yay, so beautiful. Now we are going to anchor this lining on this folded edge so that we can stitch it in the ditch to secure it to the dress. So I've got the seam allowance pressed up, and I'm just throwing pins in here at each of the seams so that I know the seams are pressed open and the lining is just overlapping that seam. And now I'm going to flip it over and add in seams just along the seam or this ditch that we're going to sew in. And you want to make sure that your stitch is going to catch the folded edge of the lining. So I'm just checking to make sure it's just right there lined up. And this is kind of a tedious process. You could sew this by hand like you did with the armholes, and that would also be a really nice finish. But yeah, it can also be done by machine. So that's what I'm showing you here. So I'm just kind of feeling it with my hand and going along the waist seam and getting it pinned in place. So we're going to sew right in this ditch so that our stitch is hidden on the finished garment, and we just have it, you know, the lining is just nicely held into place. So after you get this all pinned, flip it over, make sure everything looks right. Looks like that little spot got away from me, and I'm pulling out those anchored pins. So just refolding that and just re-getting that in. So it's perfect. And then we're just gonna stitch all the way around. Let's move on to the hem. So to prepare to hem our skirt, we're going to sew a basting stitch 3/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around, making sure you keep your seams pressed open. After you have that done, you are going to fold the hem under twice, 3/8 of an inch twice, and clip it, and then we're going to edge stitch it. You might wonder why we had to do that first stitch, and it actually has a few reasons. It serves as a guide, obviously, because you're folding right at that stitch, and then also it slightly eases in the hem, and since we have this curved A-line sweep of our skirt, it does need to like ease in a tiny bit. It just makes it overall a much more pleasant experience to hem, even though it's extra thread and it's extra work. I find it to be worth it. So I am just going along, and again, if you were using fabric you could press, you would be pressing right now. I'm just clipping it, using lots of clips in place of pressing, and it actually worked out pretty good. Once you have all of this pinned in place, you'll just edge stitch 1/8 of an inch from that folded edge, so where the basting stitch is, all the way around to finish your hem. Don't forget to back stitch at the beginning and end of this seam. Alright, let's start on the buttons. So my buttons are 5/8 of an inch, so I'm using the guide that's included. This is so that you can make marks for different sized buttons. So I'm cutting out the 5/8 inch sized one, and I'm going to transfer the marks onto the front of my bodice. So it's hard to see, but the dot is right there, and I'm using my guide, so I just fold it down so that I'm lining the middle of the circle up with that dot, and then I can still see the line where it stops and ends, and I'm just transferring that onto the spots where the buttonholes are. And you'll repeat that all the way down the dress. Now we'll get ready to sew buttonholes. So all machines are a little different. Mine has this automatic sensor buttonhole, so the special foot has the button sit in it, and that gauges the size that the hole is gonna be. And then I put that on, and then I pull down this little sensor, and that will kind of stop turn the thing around when the buttonhole is big enough, if that makes sense. And I always sew a test buttonhole first, because you just never know what's gonna go wrong. I swear buttonholes are just like, they have a mind of their own, because it's the machine's doing it, you're just guiding it. You're just there to make sure everything goes okay. But sometimes it goes, you know, things can go wrong. So always test it out. So that looks good. All right, so here we are putting our first buttonhole on the dress, and this is where you get it set up on your mark, just right. Might take a little figuring, and then you say a little prayer, ask the universe for permission to make beautiful buttonholes, because you never know what could go wrong. So here I am doing that, and I like to start at the top of my project. Other people like to start at the bottom. For me, I like to start at the top. Anyway, woo, it worked. So now that I have all these buttonholes done, I'm going to open them, and I like to put a pin at the top before I seam rip, that'll stop me from just and like splitting my whole project open. So yeah, that looks good. All right, buttonholes done. Let's sew on some buttons. So grab your needle and thread, and I have those little dots that again you can't really see on camera, but I'm just sewing in that spot. I'm anchoring my stitch by just doing a double knot right there, and this will be hidden by the button. So just take a few stitches, and this button has a shank, which means it has like a little thing underneath it. So after you've sewn a few stitches, I like to pull the thread around the button a few times and pull it tight. So here I'm doing that, and then tying it off, and that holds it upright and it gives it a sturdy finish. So just tie that off and then trim your thread. And then you're just gonna repeat that process for all of the buttons going all the way down your dress. So again, this is a good project for listening to a good podcast, maybe watching a show. Here's the final dress. I'm super happy with it. I hope this sew along was like fun or inspiring or whatever for you. And yeah, like and subscribe if you're interested. We're gonna be doing a ton more sew alongs and other types of like educational sewing videos, just fun stuff. Next up, we're doing the Heather Blazer sew along, and it's out of a very special fabric that is really popular. Every time it would come into stock in a store, it would like sell out within minutes. So me and my friend, who have a special connection, special ordered an entire bolt to split. So I've been saving it for something really special, and this is it, and it's just gonna be amazing. So stay tuned. Happy sewing!